Hello and welcome to Tiki Taka, a Chelsea FC podcast. I'm Felipe, along with my co-host John. John, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. Doing all right.
Let's discuss a recap from the Chelsea Villa game of last week, and we'll also touch base on the Chelsea Wrexham game, along with looking forward to the PSG and Newcastle games coming up this week. So for Villa, the only big surprise in the lineup was the inclusion of Jorgensen into the starting lineup. I think this came out of nowhere for a lot of fans, and it was shocking to see Sanchez removed from his starting post after having so many starts consecutively. But I think this makes sense as it comes on the back of a kind of shaky Arsenal performance. I think given Rose Senior's tactical flexibility is just potentially something he was trying to try out here. Chelsea win this game 4-1 with XG of 3.6 to Villa's, frankly, one of Chelsea's most dominant performances all year. A real pleasure to watch and huge for the top five race. John, what were your thoughts on the game?
No, exactly. I think we touched on this last week, but this felt almost like a must win going to the end of the season. And so it's good to see them come out in strong form. It was a little shaky right at the beginning, right? They get kind of a nifty goal, cut back, and then redirected into the net. And it made you think, oh my goodness, is Jorgensen up for the challenge here? Maybe Sanchez would have stopped that starting with Senior. But after that, the XG demons came back for Villa and we were able to come up with a win. It was great.
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely, my heart sank a little bit when that first goal went in so early in the game. Just knowing how important that game was to Chelsea's season. I had mentioned this last week, but I thought if we lost this game, it would be the end of our top five run. Obviously, that's not how it played out. Huge win. I think Chelsea are very much alive for this top five race. And I think they honestly look pretty good to finish in the top five ahead of Villa right now. There's still a lot of games to go, obviously, and we still play Man U and Liverpool. But I'm really growing in confidence, and I'm liking the performance we put up. I think Villa's a really strong team, despite the fact they're kind of crashing back down to form in the XG world. But I was really pleased with the performance. Is there anything you want to touch upon? I mean, there's a lot to highlight here. A lot of players really played very well today.
I'm gonna be honest. We've kind of been calling things out pretty succinctly. I feel like in our previous episodes, the guys we like are doing pretty nifty. I think it goes without saying, but we can touch on João Pedro, his first Premier League hat trick. You could say some of the goals weren't the most difficult of goals to score, but you got to be in the right place, and he's been great. He's transformed our attack. He's an out and out striker, and it's great to have him.
Yeah, I think with strikers, you might want to discredit a bunch of tap-ins, but at the end of the day, being in position to score is probably more valuable than just banging in a bunch of goals from long distance. I appreciate an attacker. Nico Jackson was kind of in a similar vein where he'd get in a lot of the right spots, even though he wouldn't finish the shots and the XGs wouldn't convert to goals. It's more important to create the XG, I think, than to just be converting goals. Like, I'd much rather have a JP than a Morgan Rogers, right?
Totally agree.
Right. And then besides JP, this was kind of Garnacho's kind of coming back to relevance game. The Twitter reactions to this game and the Villa game, or this game and the Wrexham game, which we'll still discuss here up ahead. People are really starting to favor Garnacho again. This is a player that I think in the Premier League circles is just generally disliked. Even teams that have no reason to dislike him just don't like him. I don't know why. I don't know if it's personality.
Getting booed.
Yeah, he gets
their fan base.
Absolutely, he gets booed.
I think it's the bleached hair or something. He seems cocky.
Something about him has rubbed every Premier League fan the wrong way, including Chelsea fans, because when we bought Garnacho this summer, every Chelsea fan was writing him off, saying he'd be a flop, saying he'd be a failure. And frankly, it's been a pretty quiet season for him, but despite that, he's still been one of the most productive players on this team in terms of goals and assists, and he's doing it on very small sample of minutes. For example, in this game, he put up 1.32 GA, which is a ridiculous output for a singular game, especially considering Villa is a top 3 team in the league. My opinions on Garnacho are basically that he's productive. I don't think he's a pretty player, but at the end of the day, I'll take productive over pretty, and he can do a lot in a limited sample of minutes. I think there's still things to his game he needs to add. Maybe a bit of unselfishness. I'm not going to call him selfish because I don't think that's what it is, but I guess I'm trying to dispel narratives that are probably online about him. I think there's a little bit he can add to his game, but overall, I'm a fan of Garnacho. I just think he's got to be more consistent.
I think he totally fits the mold of what we were talking about earlier with kind of the Nico Jackson type player, right? Where he's not the prettiest. Sometimes he has these wild misses or misplays, it feels like. But somehow he always seems to be in the right place and able to to get a chance on net or to support and assist. And so it's you can't discredit the numbers at the end of the day. I agree with
Yeah,
you there.
yeah, I think it's important. He gets shots as a winger, which is huge, and he gets touches in the box. All that matters, and I think it's really important to remember he's 21. Like he's 21. He's been playing on the first team for Man U since he was like 17 or so. So I mean, like these are the hallmarks of a good player. He still has to put it together, and he's not at an elite level by any means, but this is a player that you want on your team. And I think I'm really happy to see that Chelsea fans are starting to come around on him a little bit. He needs internal support if he's going to thrive and like develop into what he could be, especially given how much like negative external kind of I don't know, dislike he receives. So, anyways, really, really happy for Garnacho, and I hope he can keep building on it. He'll get a chance given the winger injuries we've been having.
Sure. We need him to stay healthy. It's a little disappointing. We can get into this in a little bit, but for him to play so many minutes with Wrexham puts you on edge a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously JP was the star of that match and Garnacho had a good performance. But on the defensive side, I thought it's worthwhile to mention that Trevor Chalobah had a really good game. He probably did get away with a penalty on Watkins. I think it would have been called. It would be kind of weak. But if you had to make me choose, I would say it was a penalty. But at the same time, despite Villa fans complaining that they didn't get a penalty, we also didn't get one against Reece James by Ian Madsen. So we'll chalk that off to even. But I thought Trev had a really good game. I think he saved 2 goals by himself. Just, it's a quiet performance for a center back. You're not always going to get your flowers if you're not scoring or, making a goal line save. But he really did have a good game. And I know he also gets a lot of hate inside of the fan base from certain circles. He did play very well. So.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was kind of a monster back there.
And then a player we've touched upon, I think, every episode now is Jarell Hato, who, with Cucurella's injuries, has just been continuing to impress. I think we were both on the same page that early in the season, he really didn't look like he was at the level. We had a lot of doubts about kind of the player he was or the player he would become, how productive he could be or useful for this Chelsea team. And this is like a rare instance where a player has really grown over the course of the season and just kind of met the expectations. He's been really solid the last couple of games. He is probably credited for giving up this first goal against Villa. I don't necessarily think it was his fault. It kind of went through a lot of players to end up in the back of the net, but he's just been putting up solid performances. I'm not saying he's world class. I'm not saying he's elite, but it's what you want to see from a young 18, 19-year-old in their first season in the Prem, kind of only now starting to stack up minutes after kind of a slow start early in the year. So I was really pleased with Hato. I'm starting to get excited. I think what I'm taking away from this game and the Wrexham game is like, this was money worth investing. He was kind of pricey at 40 mil plus, but this is a guy who's been playing on the Ajax first team since he was 16. He was the captain of Ajax at 19. There was clearly a lot of talent there, and he's a lot of physical tools. He's like very, very quick, which obviously for the Premier League is like super important. But just having pace is not going to get you anywhere in the Prem. You have to be technically stout. It's good to see in the first season him starting to put stuff together already, and it's exciting to see how much better he can get as he gets older. What do you think? What do you think, John?
Totally agree. I think kind of hit the nail on the head. He's got a lot of the tools that we're looking for with the transfer strategy. He's quick. He's young. His leadership, like you said, as the captain of Ajax, and once again, every as he continues to stack minutes, right, it feels like he's growing into his role, being a lot better. He's already pretty solid defensively. Be interesting to see what happens kind of on the offensive side and how he gets deployed there. But no, he's exciting to watch. Can't say more about that, honestly.
Yeah, I do think Cucurella's currently better than him, obviously. Like, if you had the choice, you're starting Cucurella every time. But I do think Hato offers a little bit more in some capacity of the build-up, where Cucurella is so one-footed and Hato is willing to play with both feet. It does kind of open things up just a little bit. It's not like Cucurella has been like this absolute roadblock in the build-up. But there are times where you just notice that his dependency on his left foot kind of does cause some problems. And it does make it even hard for Garnacho or whoever the left wing is to receive the ball and play, since the kind of like angle of the pass is always going to be the same. With Rosinger now, we've been doing so many kind of like tucked in fullbacks, not necessarily inverting, but the fullback sits up in such a spot where he's more inward of the touchline. Which really does open up angles to play either inside or outside. And I think that's kind of where Hato gets a little more benefit than Cucurella, where he kind of will play with both feet. I've been enjoying seeing that. I still think obviously Cucurella starts over him like any day of the week. And he's much more dependable. Hato still kind of has some gaffes, but again, it's just promising. And that's all we're looking for at this point in his career. So,
and you need to have people who can fill in with how many competitions we're playing. I mean, we've kind of been lucky up to this point that Cucurella hasn't had any sort of like injury spells or anything like that. He's been able to be kind of not the stalwart defender, but reliable in that sense. So it's good to have that backup.
All right, John, let's move on here to the Wrexham game. Now, this is a game that many people thought kind of was in the bag before the game even kicked off. Chelsea rotated their team pretty aggressively, given the fact they're going to be playing PSG early next week, this upcoming week. But, even given the fact that Chelsea rotated their team, Wrexham also rotated their team a good bit. This is a team that's sixth in the championship right now. They're chasing a playoff spot and they're trying to get promoted to the Prem. If they pull that off, that would be the fourth consecutive season they've been promoted all the way from the fifth tier. That is obviously much more of their focus than the FA Cup. Not to say, they weren't trying to win either. I mean, they rotated much less than we did, but you could see that the quality wasn't as different as you would have hoped from a Chelsea side versus a Wrexham side. Wrexham came to play. Their fans were loud and boisterous. So this game went all the way, full 120 minutes. Not what either team wants, given the myriad of games ahead for both sides. But at the end of the day, that's how it shaped out, and Chelsea was able to come away with a 4-2 win. The story of this game was actually the VAR. People online raving and ranting about VAR, despite the fact it only made correct calls in this game. John, tell me your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, I think ultimately it was kind of a disappointment, right? We come out here expecting sort of a dominant finish, right? I mean, I guess Wrexham it's no longer like a League One non-league team, right? Like they're solid league championship, competing for a spot in the playoffs there. So they're solid. They're a good team, but you still want to just be dominant, kind of all the time when you're playing a lower league side, and that simply wasn't the case, like you were saying.
Yeah, I mean,
might have to do with the fact that we're trying to change too much all at once, right? Like you said, we rotated a ton of people. Our senior really wants to bring out the back five, and it's not clicking. It feels like, and so it was just a little sloppy, maybe a lot sloppy.
Yeah, the switch to a back five was definitely questionable. We basically charted out 5 center backs in this formation. It was really suspect. I mean, as soon as you saw the lineup, you knew it was going to be an interesting day. I think the big takeaway here is going 120 minutes is just really bad for Chelsea. We ended up having starters that came in and played more minutes than we wanted. It wasn't really a good showing for the team at large. Wrexham almost took this to PKs. I mean, they almost tied it up with a narrowly offside goal. I mean, I think for me the big thing is just we spoke about this briefly last week, but I'm a proponent of VAR. I think VAR is there to kind of correct the big mistakes, and in this game there were 2 clear mistakes. I mean, the offsides was not like a hairline offsides. It was very obvious. And the red card was clearly a reckless, dangerous challenge. I think the VAR got both calls right. And I don't think I'm being biased by that at all. It's even funny because a lot of the tweets you would see online weren't that the VAR were wrong. It was that the VAR went against the spirit of the game because people really wanted this to go to penalty shootouts and they wanted Wrexham's Cinderella story to continue. I think it's like a really silly narrative or argument for why a VAR decision should be made or not made. At the end of the day, I was just happy this game was officiated pretty well. For example, if that goal had gone in and been called onside for some absurd reason, or if Garnacho had been really seriously hurt and that had stood as a yellow card, I mean, we'd all be really up in arms. Overall, it was a game I enjoyed since we got the win, but it was just much, much worse than it needed to be. I think it was sloppy. I was happy to see Josh score, but I think outside of that, he didn't even play particularly well. I didn't think that right wingback's role really suited him too much. Yeah, the only other real thing to know is Darius Sugo finally got some minutes after a really long stretch away from playing following thigh injury that needed surgery. So good to see him back. These are the kind of games you need these guys to start getting minutes in. You can't really just throw them in against a PSG or a Liverpool, right? So this is where you want them to start getting acclimated to the game again.
Yeah, totally agree. Good to see Asugo. Good to have that depth in the midfield. I thought, once again, he came on, I think, after the red card even, shortly before. So it's going to be hard to look too bad when you're playing against 10 men. But he seemed pretty solid in that sense. Like you said, just kind of a rough watch on the other side of the Cinderella story. Everyone kind of rooting against you. Kind of how it always crumbles. Right? If it was someone else, right? If it was Arsenal being taken to the wire against someone, I'd definitely be hate watching that. So I can't blame them too much.
Yeah. So following this Wrexham game, we wanted to update our listeners on our previous João Pedro segment Obviously, this is a player everyone's raving and ranting about. He's on an absolute hot run of form. So last week we touched upon his performances under Rosignor, and we now have an update given the fact that in the last 2 games since our last episode, he's put up an additional 4 goals and assists. So under Rosignor, João Pedro now has 13 goal and assists, 864 minutes, which is roughly, if you were to prorate that, that's 1.35 goal and assists per 90. And that would put João Pedro second in the top 5 leagues for this season, behind only Harry Kane. And he would be directly ahead of Olise and Mbappe. I mean, these are like truly staggering numbers. I cannot remember the last time Chelsea had a player this prolific that was not Cole Palmer. It's a joy to watch. You really hope it's not just a purple patch. He looks like a different player. He's playing incredibly well. And these are numbers with no penalties. You have to remember, Cole Palmer is the designated penalty taker. And when João Pedro has drawn penalties, those have gone to Palmer. I think it's really encouraging as a Chelsea fan. I mean, we were already excited about this 4 goal and assist ago. Now I think everyone's really raving and ranting, and we're hoping he continues doing it and continues doing it in the big games. You have anything you want to add?
Is that in all competitions?
Yeah, this is in all competitions.
I mean, love to see it. He's playing tremendously well. That goal against Wrexham and the added time, like after 120 minutes, it's a total stat pad. But I'll take it.
Yeah, that's what prolific strikers do, man. They get goals even when it doesn't matter as much. The ball has to go in the back of the net. At the end of the day, that's their job. So I just think that's really crazy company for him to be keeping. Again, he's only behind Harry Kane right now, ahead of Mbappe. I mean, again, this is a guy who's playing in the Prem and playing in the Champions League. It's not like he's playing, no disrespect to Olise, who I think is a fantastic player, but it's not like he's playing with Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga every week. Like, of course, it's easy to stat pad in some of these weaker leagues if you're on a strong team, but, Chelsea's currently 5th in the Prem, and they're playing the hardest teams week in and week out. I think it was Gareth Bale who just came out last week on a podcast and said Madrid basically think their league schedule is like a kind of numbers, be second in Europe in goal and assists for the season. He's not second in goals and assists for the season, but in this stretch, if we prorated out those numbers, that's where he would fall. Just really impressive.
Totally agree.
So, John, I wanted to pick your brain here in this next section. Obviously, we have some London town rivals who are currently in a very close relegation battle. Spurs are currently in 17th place. I think they're only 1 point outside of safety, along with Wrexham and Nottingham Forest. Not Wrexham, West Ham and Nottingham Forest. They're only 1 point gap between all these teams. And so I thought we'd have a fun little thought exercise here. If you could pick any player from the Spurs team right now, any players to bring to Chelsea, what are you thinking? Who would you bring? What's your thought process?
Yeah, I think, if you've ever played FIFA, right? This one's pretty clear. You have to go for Van de Ven, right? Just incredibly fast, relatively young, super cheap, and we've had depth issues at center back out the wazoo. I think it'd be a no-brainer. As assuming we could outbid some other teams, I'm sure plenty of people are looking after him. Spurs might not even want to let him go because he's on relatively cheap wages at only, I think, 90,000 euros per week.
So what kind of price tag are we talking? 40 million. You doing a deal?
I think you have to, right?
50?
Now I'm a little bit stingy, but I think you look at it. You look at the pocketbook.
So
and he can slot into their senior system at the back, decent passer, but ultimately, if we're in a situation like we were in at the Wrexham game, got those long balls over the top. There's no shot that Wilson is getting back in time, right? Or Chile. And so, just to have that security blanket would be great.
Yeah, so I pulled up Macalac bot comparison between Van de Ven and Chalobah. I rate Van de Ven too, but I was really surprised by how similar their radars are. Trev actually has a more impressive radar, which I think if Chelsea are going to be buying a center back, they need somebody who can start over Trev. Now, I'm not going to, I don't watch enough Spurs games to definitively tell you that this guy is like a must-get talent. When I've seen him play, I've been impressed. He has like unbelievable speed. That's like all anyone could ever talk about. But this radar is giving me some pause. I think if Chelsea buys a center back, I want someone who's a definitive upgrade over what we have now. Somebody who could pair on the right side with Caldwell and kind of shore up that Chelsea defense.
I think that's a fair point, and it all would come down to the fee and the price tag. you know, I feel like we need something, right? But I get wanting to get someone who can start over Chalaba. I think it's hard to take the Spurs, the radars of kind of an Spurs player into total consideration this season, just with how awful they've been. I don't think anyone's going to look good when there have to be good talents in there, right?
All right, John. Anyone else on the Spurs team you're thinking about?
I think it's worth taking another look at Xavi Simons again. He was already on the Chelsea radar last year, and in the summer. So I think it's again kind of always looking for some of those midfield attacking threats. We can be creative in half spaces, progress the ball centrally, right? Kind of that Rosinier mindset. And so I think he'd be worth taking another look at. He went for 65 million euros last summer, which is a little pricey. Don't love that, especially when it's good to have depth in the midfield. There's also some congestion in the midfield. So that's hard to balance out, but undeniable talent.
So let me ask you, at 65 million pounds, let's call it 60. Let's say you get a small discount. Let's call it 60 million pounds and 180K in wages. We're also going to bake in a small discount. Are you itching to sign Xavi Simons over other players that could be in the market? Like, I'm not going to list names to compare and contrast against, but just if you consider the opportunity cost, is this somebody you're really adamant about, or is this just a thought?
It's more of I think you're hoping for a steeper discount, right? It's going to be interesting to see the market for some of these players, kind of leagues wide as well, and how itching to get rid of them Spurs is going to be. But it seems from some of the reporting that we've seen that like the costs that they have just from the facilities and the wages that they still have to spend, even if pretty much everyone has like a 50% relegation clause in their contracts, they're absurd, they're obscene, and so I think it will be more of a fire sale. Be interesting though to see, right, like if the players are willing to take some sort of pay cut, because 195 per week just doesn't really fit with our methodology right now. But if you can get him to agree to the more incentive-based contract structure, I think it's worth taking a look at.
Yeah, I'm on the opposite side of you on this one. I was skeptical of Xavi Simons coming out of the Bundesliga. I have like a built-in skepticism to Bundesliga attackers, which is totally wrong for Ekitike, but was kind of spot on for Xavi Simons. I think when these players are coming from different leagues,
are so bad. There's no cohesion there.
This is all that's being proven to me. I had skepticism of his transition to the Prem, and he came to the Prem, and he's completely underperformed. It's not where I'm risking my money.
So your biases have been
exactly. That Chelsea.
He was awful for the first half of the season, and he's starting to slowly come into form.
Right? Yeah, but even then, Wirtz was one of the most expensive signings in history, and he's like an okay midfielder. Like again, like I wouldn't have done that deal if it was offered to me again right now. With Simons at that price tag and that salary, after seeing his performances in the Prem, I'm not sold at all. I wouldn't even take him at 45 million. Honestly, I think we both agree that the money's a finite resource now. Like it's not just spend galore now.
Champions League.
Right. Every single decision is an opportunity cost now. You have to weigh up every single decision against every player against other players. Like that's what it is. I'm out on Xavi Simons. Van de Ven, I could be convinced. Like I could get there. I like a lot of the traits. I can get there. But Simons, I'm out.
Here's a name you might like a little bit better.
Hold on. Let me just expand a little bit here, because I wanted to give a shout out to this other podcast called, I think it's Business of Sports, where they did a really good segment on like the financial costs of Leicester when they got relegated. And then they followed that up with like an episode about the financial costs for Spurs if they were to get relegated. And to your point, John, I mean, one of the big topics was the players are so expensive, and the amount of money they would lose from leaving the Prem and like still having to maintain these massive facilities and stuff would be so astronomical that you're right. This might be one of the first times we ever see a true fire sale from a top team where there are something like a dozen high-profile talents just like heading to the market at discounted price on discounted wages. I don't think we've ever seen something like this. I don't know when's the next time we're going to see something like this. It's going to shake up multiple teams, multiple leagues. It's also going to be interesting to see how Spurs kind of like backfill these spots if they get relegated. This is obviously all a big if. We're just like hypothesizing here, but I assume if Spurs go down, most of that team's leaving, which means they now need to buy players who are willing to play in the championship, who might get promoted the first year, but might not. I don't know what kind of prem players are taking a cut to go down to the championship. So I don't know how they build that team if they sell all those talents. And I also don't think they keep all those talents. So it's just like a weird impasse they would reach if they go down. I think it would truly be one of the most interesting modern football experiments we would see.
Yeah, there's no precedent for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen lower table clubs get relegated all the time, right? But for a Big Six club, they just expect to stay up, right?
Yeah.
So there's simply not they're not in the right posture to deal
Yeah.
with it. That's all
And
I'm saying.
one of the big things that people were discussing, it was a big unknown, was if Spurs had relegation clauses in their contracts. You would almost think that these sporting directors might bypass putting in a relegation clause when you're one of these big six teams. It's just not something you could wrap your mind around ever going down. But everyone's giving Daniel Levy a lot of credit now because it looks like all these Spurs contracts actually have relegation clauses in them. And if not for that, Spurs would be in even more trouble
Actually be
if they were to get relegated.
yeah. I mean, like you said, the players might not want to play for the lower wages to begin with, right? But he had some foresight there.
All right, John, tell me if there's any other players we want to discuss here in this segment.
I think this player might fit a little bit more with what you're thinking, and almost as well with the general Chelsea recruitment strategy. Thinking of Archie Gray, the very versatile right back, wing back hybrid. I feel like he kind of isn't the same as the Josh role, right? So there might be some overlap there, but I think you really do value someone who can provide still that coverage for Reese and Gusto, um, who have been healthy, but for a little bit was kind of shaky. You love someone who's versatile. You love someone who's young. He's only, I think, like just turning 20 years old right now, but still playing a ton. He's on cheap wages, right? Only 75,000 euros per week. That's before any hypothetical relegation clause. And so I think he could be a good investment, kind of in the same way as the Hato investment, just on the right side.
Yeah, Gray's an interesting one for me. Whenever I watch him play, I'm not necessarily impressed. Again, I don't watch a ton of Spurs games, but I've never been super impressed. I think mostly because his stature is very small. The word I want to use is kind of dainty. He seems very dainty. My actual bigger issue with Gray's, I just don't know what position he plays. They move him around a lot and they lose a lot. So it's never like they put him in a role and they win, and then you're like, oh, that's his role, or oh, he's really thriving there. They kind of move him around. They just keep
There's a lot
losing.
in
So
general. Like I'm saying, right? You can't.
yeah, it does make it hard to assess.
Yeah.
I think he's obviously a very promising talent. Like you wouldn't be playing in the Prem and getting starter minutes if you weren't kind of good. He was really raved about before he went to Tottenham. I think that is like a potentially good dart throw. I think it would really just depend on the actual price tag of that. But again, I don't know where he comes into this Chelsea team. Like they've been using him a lot at center back, for example. I would hate to ever see him play minutes at center back. Could I see him as a CDM? Maybe. As a right back? Maybe. It would be interesting for sure. It's definitely one I think that the sporting director should give thought to if we ever kind of arrived at that scenario. But yeah, that's kind of where I'll leave it.
So I've
Now,
one last name that might
yeah,
help you a little bit.
I thought you might have one more. Hit me with it.
Yeah, it's what if we brought back Connor Gallagher? Right, he
Okay,
only just
let me
came
hear
back
it.
to London in this past winter transfer window for a relatively decent fee, about 40 million euros. It would be pricey for us, I think, to bring him back. But he's like the most expensive player on the Spurs team. I think I was seeing some conflicting reporting, but we said Levy put in the relegation clauses. He left, and so it seems like he doesn't have a relegation clause in his contract. So he's a ticking time bomb for Spurs if they do get relegated. And so he's definitely gone, right, in that case. And so I think could be interesting to bring him back. Maybe a symbolic move to the fan base. He was well liked in his time here. He's another one of those players that isn't the most technically gifted and the most flashy, insane work rate. I think he slots right back into the midfield, provides great coverage and sort of that more pressing, focused, defensive role. So I think there could be use for him if, once again, maybe he doesn't stay on his nearly 200,000 euro per week paycheck.
So my first question for you is, if Gallagher comes in, who's going out?
Like, who are we selling?
Yeah, right. We can't have just six midfielders or seven midfielders. If he comes in, someone has to leave. And don't say a Sugo.
I mean, when has Lavia played for us, right?
Well, Lavia's starting to
Literally no minutes.
he's starting to ramp up his minutes. That's a big. So it's tricky, right? Because I could give you Gallagher, I could, but we have Lavia. He's a player who we bought for 65 million. So any sale we do is going to be at a loss, and he's on a relatively high salary. So again, it would be hard to move him, and if Chelsea moved him, they'd have to take a loss. Most likely, from a planning perspective, you'd assume that Chelsea would ride him out for one more year, like a year where he actually plays. They can assess how like technical he is, if he really fits the team, and then at the end of the next season, they'd move on from him. So I struggle to see that. I think. Would you take Gallagher over Andre, for example? Right, like that's something I see as more similar, like kind of a workhorse player, runs around a lot, gives a lot of effort.
I don't think you can, but I do love it.
Yeah, I think there's a segment of the fan base that loves him, and there's the segment of the fan base that calls him Galadog. So torn opinions.
How much would it be worth to just like make that section of the fan base happy, right? Like, are they willing to take him on just to appease some people? I mean, I'd rather have had him than I loved KDH, right? But last year it would have been great to have.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a solid player. But again, I think I'm at a point right now where I think Chelsea have a very finite amount of money. And I know not every purchase can be a big purchase, but I want players who improve us now. I want players who improve our starting lineup. And I want to move our starters to the bench.
I don't feel like I don't think they're ever going to do that. That's not the strategy of the recruitment.
Not necessarily. I think it has not been the strategy of the recruitment, but
Fair.
Chelsea does not seem opposed to buying a younger superstar on a massive fee if the wages are correct.
Like,
Enzo and Caicedo, both phenomenal examples because they broke the world record to bring him in
Sure.
because of how cheap they were on the wages. So I think they're not opposed to doing this in certain positions. I think for one reason or another, we haven't been able to replicate that process. And I think you can't just do that willy-nilly. You can't just be breaking the world record every summer, right? Like it just doesn't work like that. But there still is an opportunity where we can bring in players at like a 65 million pound fee or maybe even a little higher, and they're just plug and play starters. Like for example, Barcola on the left wing, or at center back, take your pick, Upamecano, whoever you want. In midfield, I wouldn't have a name to give you off the top of my head. I don't know who would start over Caicedo, for example, or Enzo, right? Like it's kind of in a third midfield slot. I like Onana a lot, for example. I don't know what kind of wages he's on, and I think his fee would be close to that $60 million ballpark, but that's a player that I would really like to bring to Chelsea. But yeah, so I think the model is not necessarily only young players. It's just all of the factors kind of have to converge, and I think right now we're better suited sitting pat than bringing in Gal.
I do like him, but I do agree they're only going to break the bank for a player who's like world class.
Right. Which is what you would hope. That actually kind of leads us really well into our next section here. We just played Villa, so I thought it'd be a good time to touch upon this. But one of the most recurring transfer rumors that Chelsea have endured in the last couple months is Morgan Rogers to Chelsea. This is a guy who's estimated to cost upwards of 80 million pounds, probably coming in on huge wages. Some people love him, think he should be the England number 10. Some people rate him above Palmer. This is a guy who is grossly overperforming XG, which some people rate as him being a phenomenal finisher. Other people who I think are more stat savvy are really scared of someone who's just grossly overperforming XG. You'd kind of hope his like metrics catch up to the underlying numbers. What are your takes on Morgan Rogers?
Yeah, I definitely think I'm more in the latter camp. Yeah, clearly a good player, right? But I don't, I'm more like you in this case, where I think he's way too expensive, and I don't think he does enough for us.
Yeah,
I don't really rate it.
Yeah, I agree. I think at that price tag, it's ludicrous. The fee being trotted around is like 80, 85 million. Some people even say 100 million, which I can believe. Like I really can believe it. I don't even think I'd bring him in at 60 million, frankly. He's supposed to have pretty high wages. I just don't think he's that good of a player. I mean, again, he's grossly overperforming his XG, which means like you'd be buying him at an overperformance. You're basically paying a premium for the fact that he overperformed XG, which is something you would assume he can't replicate because that's just kind of how the statistic works. When he played us, for example, he looked terrible. He had one shot on target and it wasn't even a good opportunity. I just don't think like really flashy long range goals is something that we need to be chasing. Like I want a guy with really good underlying fundamentals. I want a guy who tactically fits in the team and maybe provides a different profile. Maybe Morgan Rogers has a bad World Cup and Chelsea kind of sour on him. Alternatively, if he has a really good World Cup, they'll probably just buy him. If I'm being honest, I don't want Morgan Rogers.
Process.
Yeah, I think I don't want Morgan Rogers. I think you don't want Morgan Rogers. I think a huge segment of the Chelsea fan base don't want Morgan Rogers, but an equally large portion of them are dying to get this guy. They think he's going to change the team. My guess is that Chelsea are going to heavily pursue Morgan Rogers this summer. I don't, obviously it doesn't matter what the fans think at all. I think the actual team just, where there's smoke, there's fire in this rumor, and this rumor has not gone away. Morgan Rogers signed a contract extension last summer. These rumors still won't go away. I think Chelsea are really heavily going to pursue this guy. He has links to Man City. He has links to Joe Shields. I expect this to be a summer saga, and I'm just really hoping it doesn't play out.
Yeah, same. I need someone else to swoop him up, buy him for too big a fee, save us from ourselves.
Yeah, that's really the way to put it. We have to be saved from ourselves, unfortunately. Now, let me bring up one more transfer rumor to you here. So Ben Jacobs reported this week that Man U are pursuing Andre Santos. Apparently, last summer when we were trying to potentially bring in Jadon Sancho or Kobe Mino, when we were discussing fees and stuff, Man U trotted out the idea of a swap for Santos, which Chelsea quickly shut down. That was last summer when he was having a great year at Strasbourg. Now he's come into the Chelsea side. He's been putting consistent performances together. He's been playing really well. I have two questions for you. Would you do this sale? And when you ultimately say no, what is the price point that would get you there?
There is always a price. And maybe the price is lower if we still have Maresca and Andre can't find his way into the team. But he's just playing so well under a senior that I don't think you do it for very cheap. I think I would want over 65 for him to even think about him leaving.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing where, there's a value I want and I can almost justify, which is like that $65 million you mentioned, 65 million pounds. But then I try to put on like my realistic cap, and I can't see Man U getting that high, but I could see Chelsea coming down. This is a deal where I think it could get completed for something like 45 to 50. At 45, I think I'm pretty upset. He's a Brazilian player. He's been performing well. He's still very young. He's one of those players that is both cheap and they don't mind kind of having minutes on the bench. Like you can't have a guy who is complaining to have like a bench role or squad player role. So he for now, he's kind of accepting that role, which I think is great. At 45, I'm upset. At 50, I think I'm still pretty upset. At 55 plus, I can come around to it. But it's a player I don't want to let go of this summer, regardless of the price. I kind of just want to keep building with this midfield core. I'm kind of like you, where if there was a player that I'd be like comfortable letting go, it's Lavia. And again, we discussed that Lavia is probably one of the few players we really won't try to move this summer for a myriad of reasons. Midfield is also a position where we do want to just probably bring in like one more starter profile. So again, maybe that's the trade-off. Maybe you're shipping Andre Santos and you're bringing in like an Adam Warden to start, or like the guy from Nottingham Forest, Elliot Anderson, right? Like you're bringing in like a plug-and-play starter, but you're moving in like your best depth option / also a starter.
I think I prefer Andre, honestly. Like over both those guys, I think just like the way, maybe other people can learn this too, but the way he moves the ball in a senior system, I feel like he's one of the few guys who like really gets it right now.
Yeah.
First time passes. And so
yeah,
I'd be upset.
That totally makes sense, right? He has experience in a senior system. He's definitely comfortable playing under this coach. Those one-touch passes he makes are like genuinely pretty critical to build up. Not something that can't be replicated, but it has opened up lanes and broken lines of attack for sure. Again, I wouldn't want to move him, but I could understand if Chelsea, in their minds, kind of ship him off for like a clear upgrade. And I think that's maybe the key point. It has to be a clear upgrade. A guy like Elliot Anderson, for all he's done this season, which is like he's had a great season, you buy guys all the time who seem good on one team and then come over and don't perform. There are very few players who are like a sure thing. And, I don't know if Adam Warden's a sure thing. I don't know if Elliot Anderson's a sure thing. So I think it would have to be a process where Chelsea are moving Andre Santos. And I think Andre Santos would have to push for it, frankly. I think he'd have to push for it. And they would effectively be swapping him for what they consider in their minds a sure thing.
There's always a price. Sure.
Right. I think at the end of the day,
who do you think is untouchable? Like who isn't there a price for?
There's few players. I think the only players that are probably untouchable are
who looks close to signing another extension.
Right. I think Reece, I think Caicedo, I think Palmer,
Yep.
And I think João Pedro right now. I think those are the only players.
Really?
Yeah, I think because of I think because of all the hardship Chelsea have had with the striker profile, and because there is like a general vacuum of like high quality striker talent in the market right now, and the ones that there are either absurdly expensive or have like the highest wages you can imagine, vis-a-vis Osimhen. I think Chelsea have finally managed to hit on the striker profile. So I think that's one of the few players that they would not be willing to move at any price tag. You have to think they also bought JP for like 55 million. You're not going to sell him for 70 or 75, and that's a small profit. Like there are probably other players you'd rather kind of flip around for 20 million, not your out and out striker. Currently, the number two G8 per 90 guy in Europe. Like there's I think he's untouchable. Palmer for obvious reasons, Caicedo obvious reasons, Reese obvious reasons. You're probably wondering, and I'm going to give you Estevao because one, I really like Estevao, and two, I think uh, nobody's going to come in at like £100 million for Estevao after the season, and we're not going to sell him for like 60. So I just don't think it's gonna. I don't think the market's going to materialize. The only thing you're probably thinking, or listeners are probably thinking, is Enzo? Enzo? I think that there is a world where Madrid come in with a $100 million plus pound valuation of Enzo
Fernandez.
Fernandez, and there is an agreement to be made. I think Madrid and PSG. There was PSG rumors earlier this year as well. Madrid and PSG are two teams I genuinely can see. And Madrid is very likely going to lose in the Champions League this year and get second in La Liga. That is a recipe for them going out in the market and trying to spend. I could see them going after Enzo. It could even be a swap. I could see them trying to do a Camavinga swap, a Chouameni swap. Like there's a world where the actual cash in is not 100 million plus, but I don't think Chelsea sell him for less than they bought him. And maybe they sell him for like a $10 million discount to where they bought him, because now at this point with the amort it's still profit. But I think they're going to try to make a statement, especially if Madrid comes in, that's like the biggest money in the world. I think they'll try to sell him for a record transfer. And the thing is, I think if Madrid come calling, Enzo is going to try to open that door to leave. I don't think there's many teams Enzo would try to leave for, but the Madrids and the Barças of the world are like the teams that all these young South American guys have like grown up wanting to play for. And when they're on Chelsea or on a Man U, they'll like deny it. But when push comes to shove, if the money's there, like they're gonna try to make that move. So that's why I wouldn't say Enzo's untouchable. He would not get sold for less than 100 million, but I think there is a world where he gets moved. I think that's simply just the fact pattern to me.
That's a good point. It's a good argument. It would make me sick to see him in a Madrid shirt.
You know what? I would be sad to lose Enzo. I think he's a really good player. I think he's had his ups and downs, like under different coaches and through different systems. He's performed better and worse, and people have kind of theorized: is he better as a 10, or is he better as a deep lying playmaker? And I don't really have the answer. He seems to perform very well in some roles, and then perform very well in other roles, and then doesn't string consistency together, and you kind of start wondering if he's what's his best kind of role. I think, we discussed at length that the money is tight right now. The money is finite for Chelsea. If you can sell Enzo at a profit, and I'm not talking book profit like with amortization. If you could sell Enzo for 100 million plus, 120 million plus, and you're recouping all your money, that could be almost like a golden parachute for Chelsea. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying like it could be. Like I could see that being a scenario where it's a golden parachute and it kind of injects a ton of cash flow into Chelsea, and we could use that to buy two starters or like a starter. If Chelsea sell Enzo Fernandez for 120 million and the replacement player is Morgan Rogers, you could just end me. You could end me. I don't need to be around anymore. But I think there's an opportunity where this is like a golden parachute for them. It doesn't necessarily mean they'll sell him for 120 and go buy another guy for 100. They could just kind of like use that to plug a couple different holes.
Always good to have a ton of money, but it's
Yeah.
good to have a great player too, right?
Yeah. But you have to remember Chelsea need to reach certain financial thresholds to not get punished. To participate in the UEFA competitions, we have to meet certain requirements. And we spoke about this. We don't know exactly what they are because like we're receiving a little more leniency for our kind of like mishap in the past summer, and we paid that $30 million fine. We have more wiggle room. UEFA has allowed it, but within the next year or two, we're gonna have to clean everything up, and that's gonna mean a lot of money coming in, which that's most likely gonna be player sales. Like UEFA doesn't let you sell your hotel to yourself or the women's club to yourself. It doesn't count under their kind of like revenue recognition. So it's going to have to be ticket sales, match revenue, competition revenue, and player sales. And if it comes down to player sales, like, you're not going to want to sell your Palmers and stuff. But I think Enzo is one of the really high sticker price players that is probably not untouchable. So,
He is movable, but I wouldn't like, because he's been like the heartbeat of the team, right?
Yeah, he's your vice captain too.
We were dog shit, right?
Right.
And I feel like he comes with a lot of energy. He said vice captain. There's some leadership there. Like you said, there's been some not ups and downs, but some disagreements about what his best role is, what if he's even like a good player, right? And I think it's undeniable that we're a better team with him on the pitch.
Yeah. Speaking of sales, since we're just on this topic, I want to bring this up again. I think Kukurea is really likely to get sold this summer. The more Hato performs, the more likely it appears to me. Because Hato is playing well enough to be a starter. I'm not saying he's like really good. That's not my point. My point is I think he's just good enough where if you get a better center back and the team in general is performing better, second year in the system, like he's good enough that you could sell Kukurea at like a reasonable loss, but still bring in a good amount of money, like 45 million, let's call it. And you move on, you bring Hato in to be the starter, and the decrease in quality is not so drastic. It's there, but it's not so drastic. Or the alternative is you sell Kukurea and you bring in another player like a Lewis Hall, for example, to be the starter, still someone very young on reasonable wages. Like, I mean, he's on prem wages, but he's not on like 200K. He's probably fits the model. And then you would have a young starting left back in Lewis Hall, who can also play center mid, so helps a lot with depth. And then you have a very young Hato behind him, kind of deputizing, and it allows for a ton of rotation. I still think Hato could get a lot of starts. It still lets him like really grow into the league without putting a ton of pressure on him. And it also, I don't think it blocks his pathway per se. Lewis Hall is, I think, 23, maybe a little younger, but they can both kind of grow and play reasonable minutes for both of their careers to continue growing while benefiting Chelsea because Chelsea have a high quality left back and a really high quality backup. And again, Lewis Hall would provide this opportunity to kind of play in center mid. I just, with Kukureya's age, Kukureya's contract, now his recent injury, which, hopefully is not a recurring thing, but if it was, like, would only add to the argument to sell him. I think as a Chelsea fan, and again, Kukurea is also one of the players that is like part of Chelsea's heartbeat a little bit. Like fans really like him. He's a shithouser. He's an essential part of this team. The team, I know internally finds him to be the funniest player. So again, like imagine you're at your job and the funniest guy leaves. Like you're gonna be like, damn, this kind of sucks. So you don't want to just get rid of important players, but it's like a business at the end of the day. And I think there's a world where, as a fan, if I know Chelsea are gonna sell him in the summer, which we obviously don't, what I'm hoping for is a huge World Cup performance that helps add an extra 5 or 10 million pounds to that price tag. But either way, I think it's more likely than not right now that he's getting sold this summer. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or like, just if we kind of keep expanding this hypothetical, do you have any thoughts on how you would want to see Chelsea build out this team in his absence?
No, I see the world that you're building here. I think it all comes down to who we replace him with, right? You and I both wouldn't be fully comfortable with just Hato kind of on an island at left back. So we need to have some sort of coverage there. But I do see, agree, the signs are kind of pointing that way, where like if you could find a buyer for a good price, like you said, he has a great World Cup performance like he did kind of with the Euros, kind of temporarily raises value, and someone overpays, and then I think you kind of have to.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be playing on a Spain team where, like you said, he had a great Euros with them. It's a team expected to go deep into the World Cup. He's probably going to start every game, so he's going to have a real opportunity to kind of make a name for himself in the World Cup. And yeah, to your point, like I probably am not super comfortable with Hato starting every game, but I would be even less comfortable if the replacement for Hato on the bench is another 18-year-old or something similar. You know what I mean? So we'll see how that all shakes out. I thought it was worthwhile to talk about since we were kind of in this sales world. So what should we discuss next here, John?
Do you want to try and look ahead to the this week's games? It's busy.
Yeah. So I guess we'll open up with Chelsea play PSG on Wednesday this week, followed by a game on Newcastle on the weekend before coming back to Stamford Bridge on the Tuesday of the subsequent week to play the second leg against PSG. I think fans in general have a very mixed reaction about this game because it's not the weakest draw Chelsea could have gotten. It's a respectably strong team. It's not the same PSG from last year. They've like drastically regressed from that, but it's still one of the better teams in the world. And, we beat them 3-0 in the summer. Different coach. Like it's going to be a rematch now. There's going to be more to play for. Tell me how you're feeling about this game. Tell me what you're thinking with the lineup. We've got 3 games here I just mentioned, all incredibly important, right? Because Chelsea have to win these 2 games to make it to the next round of the Champions League, but Chelsea have to keep winning in the Prem to qualify for the Champions League, right? Like this is not a game these are not games we can rotate any of them, but you also can't have the starters play all 3 games back to back 90 minutes. So how are you approaching this?
I think you have to rotate. I mean, the starters are going to come in. Luckily, we were able to rest at Wrexham. We didn't go play. Endo didn't travel. Endo didn't play. Right, like these guys logged tons and tons of minutes. We're luckily able to get some rest, but played 120 minutes. We had to play some of the starters. It's brutal, but you got to play them here. Like you said, PSG hasn't been the best, right? They've been struggling recently in a league with not a lot of competition, you'd probably say. And so definitely beatable, but scary still. I think Dembele's coming back from injury. And so that's like an injection right away for them. And I don't know, you brought it up last week about, do you kind of like tank one of the games and try and focus on just the Newcastle game for Champions League qualification and all the money involved. And it's tricky. It's not an easy job for a senior. Not at all. But I think you have to play the starters.
Who are the starters? Give me the lineup. Knowing that you have Newcastle next and then PSG again, and there's going to be some amount of rotation, what is your lineup for this Wednesday?
A spot a little bit with all the players we got. It's tough. I think Esteval comes back for Newcastle, right?
Let's say for all intents and purposes, no Esteval for PSG.
For PSG, yeah, he wouldn't start. I think you go João Pedro, you go Palmer. I think you do the 3 midfield of Enzo Caicedo, Andre. On the left, I would prefer Garnacho actually, but I think you go Neto just from a Garnacho played for too many minutes perspective in this past week. And then at the back, you go Reese, Cucurella, Fofana, and for the last center back, Chalobah. And then I guess it's not a foregone conclusion who the goaltender or goalkeeper is going to be, because that's just a mess. And
so let me ask you, who do you want in goal and who do you expect in goal?
If you'd asked me like a month ago, 2 weeks ago, it would have been like Rob 100%. But he's just been so shaky recently. And so I worry that the pressure will get to him. And like, I expect Jorgensen for those reasons, and because it seems like he fits what Rosenior wants more from his goalkeeper. Saul unverified, of course, but like he's more comfortable kind of leaving the box, getting out there and kind of doing that same Penders-ish role that he did at Strasbourg. So I expect him probably, but I think you still have to. I think I would want Sanchez and hope that he regains kind of the confidence from the summer and the first part of the season.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
My starting lineup would probably be João Pedro, Palmer, Enzo, Neto, Caicedo, Andre, Reese, Chalobah, Hato. And then for the last center back, I'd probably be more comfortable going Fofana, but I can see this being a game where Sarr starts.
Who start him?
Because he provides more opportunity in the build-up, because he's dual-footed and he can play kind of more that center back role. He can play on the left or the right side of the center back pairing. He has familiarity playing PSG. So like if there was ever a game to kind of like throw him in the deep end, I mean, I think we threw him in the deep end against Arsenal. Like if he could play against Arsenal, he could probably play against PSG. I think Fofana has been like susceptible to a lot of mistakes recently. He was actually like one of my poor performers in that Villa game. Like I thought he was like heavily responsible for that first goal going in. He gave Ollie Watkins that one counterattack completely free when he just like fell to the ground for no reason. So Fofana's been really shaky for me lately. I'm starting to lose a little bit of confidence in him, even though I think his speed is like a huge asset for that back line. So I'm not really going to make a decision on that last center back spot, but it is one that I think Rosenior genuinely could start Sarr in this PSG game where it's like team he's more comfortable with. And, we're going to have to rotate. We agree on that part. So then rotate one of your starting center backs in Newcastle. So I think there's logic there. I think the other thing is on that left back position. I think because Cucurella ended up playing 60 minutes this past weekend, that probably was not the intended plan. But like, again, we shouldn't have gone to 120 minutes with Wrexham. He's coming off a hamstring injury, and that's like a really serious injury, and you can't risk aggravating it. I think, I'm not a medical expert, but I think if you really don't want to risk it, you give Hato like 60 minutes or 55 minutes, and then you give Cucurella the rest off the bench. Cucurella was obviously really good in the Club World Cup final, and again, I don't want to like depend on an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, but like I'm doing this from a physical medical consideration standpoint. I would rather start a healthy Cucurella over Hato any day of the week, right? Like there's no question asked, but I don't want to risk an injury more than I want him to play these like, we have two legs here. We can, I think there's the risk you could take because medically you might need to.
What I think they probably do is I think Gusto takes up that role on the left side again, like he's done in the past, and that's probably how they try and get around.
So I was watching Kiers live stream the other day. So this is a shout out to Keir Doyle, who's a Chelsea creator that I really like. I think he's like super super smart. I watch all his videos. But he basically said that um, Chelsea will line up the exact same way they lined up for the Club World Cup. Like instead of Andre Santos in the midfield, Reece in the midfield, so on the right wing or right back, and then Neto starting in the left. And Neto is going to have like a very key responsibility of like tracking Hakimi up and down, which he does a lot better than Garnacho would defensively. And then Gusto is going to kind of be like an overlapping fullback where Palmer will kind of cut in to be like an inside 10, which will bring like Mendes. This is like exactly how we played in the Club World Cup, right? So like Mendes comes in to track Palmer, and then that leaves like kind of the right wing open, and Gusto can just like fly up and down. I would love that. I would love to replicate our Club World Cup shape and performance, obviously.
It's now broke, right?
Right. Now to goalies, because I think this is a bigger conversation. I would both prefer Sanchez and start Sanchez myself. I suspect, especially because Sanchez played against Wrexham, that Jorgensen is going to be playing against PSG. Now, it appears that Rosignor, after Rob's a couple shaky performances, has decided to give Jorgensen a run of games because he's decided that Jorgensen's better on the ball, which I think my take here is that I'm unsure if Jorgensen's better on the ball. Rob sometimes is like obviously startled, and it makes him just like look really bad in the games. But he has an assist this season on a deep ball. He is a good passer out of the back, maybe not the best. And then again, he's like fallible, but Jorgensen, I guess, has looked somewhat more composed in the back and seems a capable passer. But Sanchez has a really good long ball that, again, was a huge weapon against PSG in the Club World Cup final. I think it's going to be like really crucial to still have that in the skill set. Rob is a substantially better shot blocker than Jorgensen. He's much taller than Jorgensen and therefore a much better cross claimer than Jorgensen. Like these are all additional skills outside of playing out of the back that I think are like hugely important for a goalkeeper. I mean, like I think in the Prem, cross claiming is more important than like in the Champions League, for example, because how prevalent set pieces are. But like at the end of the day, the goalie's job is to block shots, right? And like give me the goalie who is longer and can block shots better, right? And I think the difference in footwork between Rob and Jorgensen is not as vast as the difference in the other qualities that Rob like surpasses Jorgensen. That's really my take. I'd be much more confident with Rob in the back, but I suspect Rosignor is going to keep playing Jorgensen until we have like basically a meltdown back there.
Not looking forward to that.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, Rob was such a key part with that distribution with the long ball in the Club World Cup that I don't think you can really discredit that, even given his kind of recent shakiness. He had a great ball kind of out to the lap against Wrexham to score a first goal, right? So he's still got that, even if he's iffy on the ball.
Yeah, I think he does just have games where he starts off shaky, and that's just the rest of the game. But he has so many games where he's just not shaky, and he's really good. People, I think a good chunk of the Chelsea fan base, at least on Twitter, up until maybe 3 or 4 games ago, had him as one of the leading contenders for Chelsea Player of the Season. So like this guy's been putting in good performances, like in and out. I don't mind a player having like 2 or 3 bad weeks. It happens. So anyways, I prefer Rob. What I want to segue this into though, which is a long-term view here, is me and you have discussed behind the scenes Penders and if he's ready to come to Chelsea next year, what we kind of think is the best approach for his career and kind of easing him into the Chelsea team. I think both of us had agreed that we don't expect him to be the keeper at Chelsea next year, and we prefer him not to be. Do you think the fact that Rosignor seems to be prioritizing ball playing over the rest of the goalkeeper skill set with this Jorgensen decision? And again, we are still to see if this is going to be like a week in, week out thing. Assuming it is, do you think that opens the door for Penders to join and be the starting goalkeeper for Chelsea next year? And is that something you are now more open to, given where we're at?
Yeah, I think it has to indicate that, right? Like clearly this is what he's prioritizing. Rosignor seems to think that, doesn't even think, but he thinks that his system works best when the goalie can come out and be super confident on the ball. And so that's kind of why we have Penders, what we've sort of developed him into. And so it's a little bit tricky to try and throw him into that situation, into the deep end right away. If we were to bring him next season, I think we were kind of worried about his pathway in general and making sure that it wasn't going to get blocked. Well, when Sanchez was playing so incredibly well at the beginning of the season, and so I'd be fine kind of just bringing him in and riding with him until the wheels fall off.
Okay, interesting. I think that this has certainly opened the pathway for his coming to Chelsea next year, more so than ever. But personally, this hasn't shifted my view of what I want him to be. I want him to be a top tier goalkeeper. I think he could be, right? Like he's one of the taller goalkeepers out there. He's a decent shot stopper, but obviously like top tier with his feet. I just really don't want Chelsea to bring him in kind of subprime and then like the pressure gets to him, kind of stunts his development, stunts his confidence. I would really like and like I still like Rob, so like I'm comfortable riding Rob out for a couple more seasons. I think what I really want is one more season of Rob, not Jorgensen, Rob. And I would really like if Pender's got a Prem loan next season. Any I guess top division would be great. Like if he played in the Ligue 1 or if he played in La Liga, whatever. It could be a good opportunity and experience, but we want him to come and dominate the Prem at some point. I think obviously the most ideal loan would be starting in the Prem. And it has to be for like a half decent team. Like I don't want him to go to a relegation team because he's just going to be conceding goals left and right. And it's like not good for his confidence. He's probably really not going to like gain too much out of that. He needs to go to like a Fulham, honest, like a team that's going to finish in this like 9 to 12 range. I think is like a sweet spot.
Are you gonna
And
want
then
to give up
after that,
a loan like that though? I don't.
sorry.
If you're a team like that, would you want to just have a goalie for a season? I feel like you need
It
some degree
happens.
of desperation almost though from like the price would have to be really good for them.
Could I remind you that only 2 seasons ago, Bournemouth were willing to take Kepa Arrizabalaga on loan for a season as a starting goalkeeper. So I think there is some leeway to get Penders a Prem loan.
Relegation worthy.
Hey, Bournemouth aren't bad. Bournemouth weren't bad. But look, there's goalies out there who are just like substandard. Like off the top of my head, I can't remember if this is the case or not, but like does Bernd Leno play at Fulham? Like I think if Penders plays pretty well for the rest of the season, like there are Prem teams who would give him a chance if Chelsea came in at like a low loan fee or no loan fee. I'd like to see it. That's all I'm saying. I'd like to see it. I think that would be the best pathway for his development, and it would give I think Chelsea fans a lot more confidence with him coming in 2 years from.
Watch out, the Burt fans are gonna come after you now.
Yeah, I know. Off with my head. Okay, so um, I guess there's two more things I want to get to here. One is now off the back of beating Wrexham in the FA Cup. Today, the draws were announced, and Chelsea got the most favorable draw of the round, which was drawing bottom of League One, Port Vale at home. I think this is a great game because it's going to be, it gives us the opportunity to basically. This is going to be very arrogant, and if it doesn't happen, I'm going to sound horrible, but we're going to auto qualify for the semis at Wembley. It means after this we're one game away from a final, potentially under Rosignor. A lot of these other teams in the cup are going to knock each other out. So I think City and Liverpool are playing. Arsenal have a relatively easy draw against Southampton, but it's one step closer to a trophy under Rosignor. And for Chelsea Football Club, I think it's going to be great in this like very compact schedule we currently have to give us a very clear rotation option. And this is probably like the best game we've actually had all season to bring in youth players. I mean, we've loosely rotated in a couple guys in some of these cup games. Shim's got in a couple minutes, Jesse Derry's got in a couple minutes, but I think this is the lowest quality competition we've played all year. And it's going to be at the time where we need the most rest. So I think we could see another Jesse Derry cameo, a Shimuka cameo, Ryan Kuva McQueen cameo, maybe some even other unexpected names. So I'm personally really, really excited about that match. Also because it could just be a cakewalk that's like 3-0, and we have enough heart attack games every week. It's okay to have one where you're more calm. So that's the upcoming FA Cup draw. I think that's first week of April. But so I want to end here, John, with some score predictions. We're gonna have another episode at the end of this week. So after that, we'll discuss both the Newcastle and the PSG games. I don't want you to give me the whole PSG series nor the second leg. I want you to just cut off your score prediction for the first PSG game and Newcastle, and let's see where we're at the end of the week.
Okay, I think unfortunately away game is tough. For whatever reason, we seem to be we're a slow starting team, it appears. In recent weeks, right? We're constantly letting the first couple goals and having to stage these comebacks. Normally was pretty thunderous effect. But still, I think we end up losing the first leg, and I think it'll be like 2-1, 3-2. So we'll keep it close, but I think we're going to have to come. We're going to end up going back to hopefully Stamford Bridge. They let us hold the game there with some goals to make up.
What about Newcastle?
Newcastle, it's tough.
Remember, it's going to be we're going to rotate. That's a guarantee. You're probably going to see, and even if the starters, a lot of them start, you're going to see a lot of early subs. Like, it's a guarantee that there's going to be heavy minutes of non-starter minutes. So we're talking Delap minutes, we're talking Garnacho minutes, we're talking probably Sar, Badiashile, Gusto, Lavia, maybe even Asugo. Like, these are the guys who are potentially going to be on the field. So, what do you think?
Great point. There's going to be a decent amount of rotation. I think Newcastle is very beatable. I think I think they've got their own sort of injury crisis going on. I saw something that Esteban can possibly be coming back there for some minutes himself as well. So I do think we end up winning that game 2-1.
Very nice. Okay.
Now, turn it back on you.
Yeah. I think Chelsea are going to keep it close in Paris. I think we match up relatively favorably to this PSG team. I think they have a lot of individual talent, but we saw there's clear ways to exploit this. And they're going to be missing two of their starting midfielders for this first game. Depending on how they decide to address that, we could very much kind of like take it to them. I'm not going to predict a win, even though I think it's possible depending on who they trot out, frankly. Like, if they start out, if they put Dro to play and we put out our midfield three, like, I think we could win. But I'm not going to predict a win. I'm going to predict a 2-2 tie in Paris. I think Chelsea are going to come off that game feeling really good, a lot of momentum. And then I think that against Newcastle, we win 2-1. It's a home game. I know we're going to rotate a lot. It's not going to be easy, but I'd much rather play Newcastle at Stamford Bridge than St. James Park. That's like one of the more difficult atmospheres to play in. I think the rotation is going to prove very challenging, and it could be a game where maybe Chelsea don't even deserve to win. But I think with how important all these fixtures are, and I think the players are playing pretty well, I think they're going to come around, and I think we can get a 2-1 win here. I guess one important thing to note, right, is that despite the fact we're predicting a loss and a draw, even if it's close against PSG in Paris, we're obviously hoping to go back to Stamford Bridge next week and get a win. But you have to remember, we play Newcastle midweek, and the French league has postponed PSG's game against Nantes to later in April to allow them the full week's rest. And that's going to make a huge difference for them in terms of injuries, in terms of fatigue. It's going to play, I think, a huge, huge role in that second leg. So I think even if Chelsea come away with a tie in Paris, it's not a done deal going back to Stamford Bridge. I guess no game ever is, but this more than most. It's going to be really interesting to see how this next 7 days play out.
Yeah, that's brutal. Hopefully, though, we'll pull through.
That's right. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 3 of Tiki Taka, a Chelsea FC podcast.
Later,
Go Chelsea. Up the Blues.